My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and at 73 years old, I thought I knew everything there was to know about family loyalty. I was wrong. Dead wrong. When my son Marcus looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom, it's time for you to move out," I felt something break inside me that I didn't think could ever be repaired. But sometimes, when life knocks you down, you discover just how strong you really are. What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the beautiful Victorian mansion we'd called home for Foe. Retire 7 years wasn't actually in his name, it was in mine, all of it, every brick, every garden stone, every chandelier that had been in our family for generations. And when I walked out that front door with nothing but my dignity and a small suitcase, I took something else with me too, the deed to everything they thought they owned. Before I tell you exactly how I turned the tables on the family that betrayed me, I want you to know that this story has more twists than you can imagine. If you've ever felt underestimated or pushed aside by people who should have loved you most, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And if you've faced a similar situation with ungrateful family members, share your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and who knows, your story might be featured next, trust me. After you hear what my daughter-in-law Vivian did to manipulate my own son against me, you'll have plenty to say. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, in the charming coastal town of Millbrook Harbor, Maine. It was my late husband's birthday, would have been his 75th. Every year since Robert passed 5 years ago, we'd gathered at our family estate on Maple Hill Drive to honor his memory. The house had been Robert's pride and joy, a stunning 1890s Victorian with wraparound porches, stained glass windows, and gardens that overlooked the harbor. He'd spent 30 years restoring every detail, and I'd spent just as long filling it, with love, laughter, and memories. That particular October evening, the autumn leaves were putting on their final show, painting our maple trees in shades of gold and crimson. I'd prepared Robert's favorite meal, lobster bisque, herb-crusted lamb, and his mother's famous apple tart. The dining room table was set with our finest china, the same spode pattern we'd received as wedding gifts nearly 50 years ago. Marcus arrived first, with Vivian, his wife of 8 years. She was third due to his 45, a real estate developer from Boston who'd swept my son off his feet after his divorce, tall, blonde, with the kind of sharp beauty that photographs well but never quite reaches the eyes. Vivian had a way of making suggestions that sounded like compliments but left you feeling somehow diminished. "Eleanor, this house is just gorgeous as always," she said, kissing my cheek with lips that felt cold despite her warm words, though I have to say, it must be such a burden for you to maintain all this space by yourself, all these stairs, all these rooms. It's really quite a lot for a woman your age. My daughter Sarah arrived moments later with her husband Tom and their teenage twins, Emma and Jake. Sarah had always been my quiet one, content to let others take the spotlight, but sharp as a tack when it came to reading people. She shot Vivian a look that could have frozen the harbor. "Mom manages just fine," Sarah said firmly, hugging me tight. "This house has never looked better. And you know Dad would be so proud of how you've kept everything exactly as he loved it." But as we gathered around the table, I noticed something different about Marcus. He seemed agitated, distracted, and kept exchanging meaningful glances with Vivian. Every time I mentioned plans for Christmas or next summer's garden party, he'd shift uncomfortably in his chair. It was during dessert that Vivian made her move. "Eleanor, Marcus and I have been talking, and we're really concerned about you rattling around in this big house all alone. Have you given any thought to maybe downsizing? There are some lovely assisted living communities in Portland, very upscale, with all the amenities you could want." The room went silent. Even the twins looked up from their phones. "Assisted Living, I repeated, setting down my fork carefully. I'm 73, not 93. I garden every day. I volunteer at the library twice a week, and I can still outrun your husband up these stairs. Vivian laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that had sharp edges. Oh. We know you're incredibly active, but accidents happen, especially to people who are, well, getting on in years. Just last month, Mrs. Henderson from the yacht club fell down her stairs and broke her hip. She's in assisted care now, and her family says it's the best thing that ever happened to her. The best thing, I said slowly, would be if people stopped treating elderly women like we're fragile ornaments waiting to shatter. Marcus finally spoke up, and his words hit me like a physical blow. Mum, maybe Vivian has a point. This house is a lot of work, and the property taxes alone must be eating up most of your income. If you sold now, while the market's strong, you could have a really nice nest egg for your retirement years. That's when I realized what this was really about. They didn't want me in assisted living for my own good. They wanted this house. They wanted my home, my sanctuary, the place where I'd raised my children and buried my dreams and built my life with the man I'd loved more than breathing, after everyone left that night. I sat in Robert's study, surrounded by his books and the faint scent of his cologne that still lingered in the leather chair where he used to read. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, and I felt every one of my 73 years settling into my bones, but I wasn't some helpless old woman. Despite what my son and his wife seemed to think, Robert and I had been very careful about our financial planning, and there were things about our estate that even Marcus didn't know. I walked to the antique safe hidden behind Robert's portrait, a secret only Sarah knew about. Inside, among other important documents, was something that would have made Vivian's perfectly manicured fingers tremble if she'd known about it, the deed to not just our house, but to 3 other properties in Millbrook Harbour that Robert had quietly purchased over the years as investments. There was the charming bed and breakfast on Harbour Street that brought in steady rental income, the commercial building downtown that housed the popular Anchor Cafe and boutique shops, and a gorgeous waterfront lot that developers had been trying to buy for years. Combined with our primary residence, the portfolio was worth just over $4 million. More importantly, every single property was in my name. Robert had insisted on it after his first heart attack 10 years ago. Eleanor, he'd said, I want to make sure you're protected no matter what happens to me. These properties will give you independence and security for the rest of your life. I tried to argue that everything should be joined, but Robert had been adamant. Promise me you'll never let anyone pressure you into giving up your security. He'd made me swear, not even our children, especially not if they're being influenced by someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart. At the time, I'd thought he was being overly cautious. Now I realized he'd been remarkably prescient. As I sat there in the quiet house, surrounded by 47 years of memories, a plan began to form in my mind. If Marcus and Vivian wanted to treat me like a confused old woman who didn't know her own mind, then perhaps it was time to show them exactly how sharp the mind still was. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Sarah, I know it's late, but I need to ask you something important. That conversation at dinner tonight, how long do you think this has been brewing? My daughter's voice was tight with anger. Mom, I've been watching Vivian circle this house like a shark for months. Every time I visit, she's making comments about the wasted space or how impractical it is for you to live here alone. And Marcus, I don't know what she's done to him, but he's not the brother I grew up with. What would you say if I told you I had a way to find out exactly what their intentions are? There was a pause. I'd say I'm listening. 3 days later, Marcus called and asked if he could come by for coffee. Just him. He said, no Vivian. He wanted to have a heart-to-heart about my future. I spent that morning in my garden, cutting the last of the season's roses and arranging them in the crystal vase Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. If this was going to be a battle, I wanted to face it surrounded by beauty. Marcus arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. Punctual as always, he looked tired, stressed, and kept running his hands through his greying hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "Mom, you look wonderful," he said, accepting the cup of coffee I offered. "The garden's beautiful as always. Your father planted those rose bushes the year you were born," I said, settling into my chair across from him. "He said he wanted you to grow up surrounded by beautiful things." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's actually part of what I wanted to talk to you about, this house. All these memories, Mom. I'm worried that holding on to the past is keeping you from embracing your future. Is that what Vivian told you?" His face flushed. "This isn't about Vivian. This is about me worrying about my mother." "Then let me ease your worries," I said calmly. "I'm in perfect health. I have excellent insurance, and I'm financially secure. I have friends, activities, and a life that I love. What exactly are you worried about?" Marcus set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. "Mom, I know you think you're fine, but things can change so quickly at your age. What if you fell and no one found you for days? What if you had a medical emergency? This house is isolated, and the nearest neighbor is half a mile away." "I have a medical alert system," I pointed out, "and Sarah calls me every day." "That's not enough," Marcus said, his voice rising. "Mom, I'm going to be direct because I love you too much to dance around this. Vivian and I have been looking at some properties, and we found the perfect place for you. It's a beautiful senior community in South Portland, right on the water, with nursing care available if you ever need it. You'd have your own apartment, but there would always be people around, activities, social opportunities, a senior community," I repeated. "And what happens to this house?" Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Well, obviously it would need to be sold, but Mom, think of the financial freedom that would give you. No more property taxes, no more maintenance costs, no more worrying about repairs or upkeep. You could travel, take cruises, really enjoy your golden years." I stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the harbor. A fishing boat was coming in with the morning's catch, just like Robert used to do in the early years of our marriage. "Marcus," I said without turning around, "do you remember what you told me when you bought your first house, Mom?" "I don't see what that has to do with you." "Said that having your own home made you feel like a real adult, like you had roots, stability, a place in the world that was truly yours." I turned to face him. "Did those feelings disappear when you turned 70? That's different. I was starting a family, building a career, and I'm maintaining a legacy. This house is your inheritance, Marcus, yours and Sarah's. Why would you want me to sell it?" For just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or recognition of what he was really asking me to do. But then his expression hardened again. "Mom, I need you to really think about this. Vivian has found a buyer who's very interested in the property. They're willing to pay top dollar, and with the market the way it is now, you might not get another opportunity like this." And there it was, the truth finally laid bare. This wasn't about my safety or my happiness. This was about money, and about Vivian's plans for my home. "I see," I said quietly, "and you've discussed this with Sarah." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Sarah's always been too emotional about this house. She doesn't understand the practical realities." "The practical realities," I echoed. "Tell me something, son." "If I were to move to this senior community, and if I were to sell this house to Vivian's buyer, what would happen to the proceeds?" "Well, obviously you'd keep most of it for your living expenses and care. But Vivian thought it might make sense to put some of it in a trust, for tax purposes." She has a financial advisor who specializes in estate planning for seniors. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I see, and who would manage this trust? Marcus couldn't quite meet my eyes. Well, as your eldest child and your son, it would probably make sense for me to be the trustee. Just to make sure everything was handled properly, there it was, the complete picture. Move me into assisted living, sell my home, take control of my money, and reduce me to a dependent old woman living on an allowance from my own son. That's very thoughtful of you, I said, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. Let me think about it. Marcus brightened. Really, Mom, I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. Vivian will be thrilled. She's already picked out some brochures for the senior communities, and she thought maybe we could all take a tour this weekend, after he left. I sat in my empty house and felt something I hadn't experienced since Robert's funeral, absolute bone-deep loneliness. But this time, it wasn't grief that was isolating me. It was the realization that my own son was willing to betray me for money and property. I picked up the phone and called the one person I knew I could trust completely, Sarah. I need you to come over and bring Tom. We need to talk. Sarah arrived. Within an hour, Tom close behind her. One look at my face told them everything they needed to know. He actually said it, Sarah said, sinking into the sofa. He actually asked you to sell the house. I told them everything, the senior community, the trust. Marcus's new role as my financial guardian. With each detail, Tom's expression grew. Darker. Double quotes Eleanor. I hate to say this, but I think you need to involve a lawyer, Tom said. What Marcus is describing sounds like elder financial abuse, even if he doesn't realize it. Oh. He realizes it, Sarah said bitterly. That woman has been working on him for months, filling his head with ideas about how much this house is worth and how wasteful it is for Mom to live here alone. I heard her on the phone once, talking to someone about liquidating assets and maximizing returns. I took a deep breath. I have an idea, but I'm going to need both of your help. And Sarah, what I'm about to tell you must stay between us, no matter what happens. I led them to Robert's study and opened the safe. Their eyes widened as I showed them the deeds, the financial statements, the full scope of what Robert and I had built together. Mom, Sarah whispered, you're not just financially secure, you're wealthy enough to have options. I agreed. And that's exactly what Marcus and Vivian don't want me to realize. I outlined my plan. It was risky, and it required perfect timing, but it would expose exactly what my son and daughter-in-law were really after. Are you sure about this, Mom? Tom asked. Once you set this in motion, there's no going back. Marcus is going to feel betrayed. Marcus betrayed me first, I said quietly. Now I'm just going to show him the consequences of that choice. The next morning, I called Marcus and told him I'd been thinking about our conversation. Would he and Vivian like to come over for Sunday dinner? I had something important to discuss with both of them. I spent the week preparing. I created a fake will, one that left everything to Marcus in trust. Managed by Vivian, I printed out brochures for the senior community they'd suggested. I even went so far as to tour the facility and get pricing information. But most importantly, I set up a small recording device in the dining room, hidden among Robert's collection of antique books. If Marcus and Vivian were going to show their true colors, I wanted evidence. Sunday arrived grey and drizzly, the kind of November day that makes you grateful for warm houses and family dinners. I cooked all of Marcus's favorites: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, and apple pie for dessert. Vivian arrived dressed like she was attending a business meeting rather than a family dinner, sharp black suit, hair pulled back severely, carrying a leather portfolio that I suspected contained papers I wasn't going to like. Eleanor, you look wonderful, she said, though her eyes were already scanning the room, calculating, appraising. I hope you've had time to think about our conversation. I have, I said, leading them to the dining room. In fact, I've done more than think. I've made some decisions. Over dinner, I played the part of the confused, overwhelmed elderly woman they expected me to be. I asked worried questions about living alone, fretted about the cost of home maintenance, and wondered aloud if maybe they were right about the senior community. Vivian practically glowed with satisfaction. Eleanor, I'm so proud of you for being open to change. It shows real wisdom and maturity. After dessert, I brought out the papers I'd prepared. I've been looking at the brochures you gave me, and I think you might be right about Sunset Manor. It does look lovely, and the care options would give me peace of mind. Marcus reached across the table and patted my hand. Mom, I'm so relieved. I've been so worried about you. There's just one thing, I said, pulling out the fake will I'd created. If I'm going to do this, I want to make sure my affairs are in order. I've drafted a new will, and I'd like you both to look it over. Vivian's eyes lit up as she scanned the document. According to my fabrication, Marcus would inherit the house and all property, with Vivian named as co-trustee of the estate. There was even a clause stating that if I became incapacitated or unable to make sound financial decisions, they would have full power of attorney. This looks very comprehensive, Vivian said, though I noticed she was trying to hide her excitement. Very smart to get everything organized before you move. The timing is perfect too, Marcus added. My buyer is still very interested in the property, and with you settled in Sunset Manor, we could probably close by the end of the year. Your buyer? I asked innocently. Vivian shot Marcus a sharp look, but it was too late. What Marcus means is that we've been in touch with a developer who specializes in historic properties. He's very interested in preserving the house's character. Oh, that's wonderful, I said. I'd hate to think of it being torn down. What does he plan to do with it? Well, Vivian said carefully, he mentioned something about turning it into luxury condominiums, high-end units that would preserve the original architecture while maximizing the property's potential. My heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral. They planned to carve up my beautiful home, my sanctuary, into profitable pieces. Every room where I'd raised my children, every corner where Robert and I had built our life together, would be sliced up and sold to strangers. That sounds very efficient, I managed. It is, Vivian said, warming to her subject. And the return on investment would be substantial, much better than just letting the property sit here appreciating slowly. We could probably clear $1 million after taxes and fees, Marcus added. Maybe more, depending on the final sale price. I nodded thoughtfully. That would certainly provide a nice nest egg. And with you managing the trust, I wouldn't have to worry about any of the financial details. Exactly, Vivian said. We'd handle everything. Investments, bill paying, budgeting for your care. You could just focus on enjoying your retirement. For the next hour, they outlined their vision for my future. They'd already looked into the legal requirements for transferring power of attorney. They had names of financial advisors who specialized in senior wealth management. They'd even researched the tax implications of selling the property and moving the proceeds into various investment vehicles. It was a comprehensive plan for taking control of my life, my money, and my property. The only thing they hadn't planned for was the possibility that I might be recording every word. As they prepared to leave, Vivian handed me a folder full of documents. These are just preliminary papers, Eleanor, nothing binding yet. But if you could look them over and sign where indicated, we can start the process of getting everything transferred. I flipped through the papers. power of attorney forms, property transfer documents, even a pre-signed contract for the sale of the house to Vivian's mysterious developer. This is very thorough. I said, you've obviously put a lot of thought into this. We just want what's best for you, Mom, Marcus said, kissing my cheek. I love you too much to let you struggle alone. After they left, I sat in my living room and replayed the recording. Every greedy comment, every calculated manipulation, every moment when they thought they were managing a confused old woman, it was all there, captured in perfect digital clarity. I had the evidence I needed. Now it was time for the final act. The next morning, Sarah called me in tears. Mom, Emma just told me something that's going to break your heart. She overheard Marcus and Vivian talking last night. And oh, Mom, I don't know how to tell you this. My granddaughter Emma had been babysitting for a neighbor and had come home to find Marcus and Vivian still talking in the kitchen, hiding on the stairs. She'd heard them discussing their plans for me and for the family. Vivian told Marcus that once you're in the senior home and they have control of your finances, they can start restructuring the family dynamics, Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. She said Sarah's too emotional and attached to the house and that they needed to make sure she didn't interfere with their plans. What did Marcus say? He said you'd always favored me anyway, and that it was time the family finances were managed by someone with business sense instead of sentiment. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not only was Marcus willing to betray me, but he was ready to cut his own sister out of the family inheritance. There's more. Mom, Vivian said that once the house is sold and converted to condos, they're planning to buy one of the units for themselves. She called it keeping the property in the family while still maximizing its profit potential. So they weren't just planning to sell my home, they were planning to live in it, to take my sanctuary, chop it up for profit, and then move into the pieces. Emma heard all of this, every word. And Mom, she's heartbroken. She loves that house almost as much as you do. Some of her favorite memories are of summers there with you and Grandpa. I made a decision that I knew would hurt, but that was necessary for what came next. Sarah, I need you to do something for me, and it's going to be hard. I need you to pretend to support Marcus and Vivian's plan. What? Mom, I can't. Listen to me tonight. I want you to call Marcus and tell him that you've been thinking about what's best for me and that maybe they're right about the senior community. Tell him you're worried about me living alone and that you think Vivian's plan makes sense. But why would I? Because I need them to believe they've won completely. I need them to think that even you, my strongest ally, have been convinced that their way is best. Can you do that for me? There was a long pause. Finally, Sarah said, I trust you. Mom, but this better be one hell of a plan. That evening, I listened from my bedroom extension as Sarah made the call. She was a better actress than I'd given her credit for. Marcus, I've been thinking about Mom. And I'm worried I've been selfish. She said, you and Vivian are right. The house is too much for her, and I've been so focused on preserving memories that I haven't been thinking about what's actually best for her safety and happiness. I could hear the relief in Marcus's voice. Sarah, I'm so glad you're seeing this clearly. Vivian was worried that you might try to interfere. But I knew you'd come around once you really thought about what's best for Mom. I just want her to be safe and happy, Sarah said, and if that means selling the house and moving her somewhere with proper care available, then that's what we should do. It's the right decision, Marcus assured her. And Sarah, I want you to know that Vivian and I will make sure Mom's financial security is our top priority. We won't let anything happen to her. After Sarah hung up, she called me back. I feel like I need a shower, she said. The way he talked about Vivian's financial expertise and their comprehensive care plan. Mom, they really think they're doing this for your own good. No, I said quietly. They think they're doing this for their own good, and they've Convinced themselves that it happens to be good for me too. There's a difference. The next day, Marcus called to tell me how pleased he was that Sarah had come to her senses. He wanted to schedule a meeting with all the relevant parties, me, him, Vivian, and their lawyer, to finalize the paperwork. We can do it at Henderson and Associates downtown, he said. They specialize in elder law, and they can make sure everything is handled properly. I agreed, but suggested a different location. You know how I feel about lawyers' offices, I said. They make me nervous. Could we meet somewhere more comfortable, maybe at the Anchor Cafe? I know the owner, and she could let us use the private dining room. What I didn't tell Marcus was that I knew the owner because I own the building. And the private dining room had excellent acoustics for recording conversations. That's a great idea, Mom. Much more relaxed. How about Thursday afternoon? Thursday is perfect, I agreed. Marcus, there's just one thing. I'd like Tom to be there too, if that's all right. He's always been so good with financial matters, and I'd feel better having him look over the papers. I could hear the hesitation in Marcus's voice. Tom was a retired accountant, and he'd never particularly liked Vivian, but refusing would look suspicious. Of course, Mom, family should be involved in important decisions. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. The Anchor Cafe's private dining room overlooked Millbrook Harbour, with wide windows that caught the afternoon light and made the water sparkle like scattered diamond. I arrived early and chose a seat facing the door, with my back to the windows. I wanted to see everyone's faces clearly when the truth came out. Marcus and Vivian arrived promptly at 2 o'clock. Both dressed like they were closing a major business deal. Vivian carried the same leather portfolio from Sunday dinner, now bulging with additional documents. Tom arrived a few minutes later, giving me a subtle nod that told me he'd completed the task I'd given him. Well, I said once. Everyone was seated. I suppose we should get started. Marcus, you said you had papers for me to sign. Vivian opened her portfolio and spread documents across the table with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Power of attorney forms, property transfer agreements, financial management contracts, and the sale agreement for the house. These are just the preliminary documents, she explained, pointing to each paper in turn. Once you sign these, we can begin the process of transferring your assets into the trust and getting you settled at Sunset Manor. I picked up the power of attorney form and read it carefully. It was comprehensive to the point of being frightening. Marcus and Vivian would have complete control over every aspect of my financial life. This is very thorough, I said. You've thought of everything. We want to make sure you're completely protected, Marcus said. No detail is too small when it comes to your security and comfort. I signed the first document, then the second. Vivian was practically glowing with satisfaction. Even Marcus looked relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Now, Vivian said, pulling out a thick contract, this is the sale agreement for the house. The buyer is prepared to close within 30 days, and the price is very generous, $2.4 million. I looked at the buyer's name on the contract, Millbrook Development LLC. I don't recognize this company, I said. Are they local? They're new to the area, Vivian said quickly, but they come highly recommended, and they specialize in historic preservation projects. I nodded and reached for my pen, but instead of signing, I set it down and looked around the table. Before I signed this, I said, I have a confession to make. I haven't been entirely honest with all of you. The room went silent. Vivian's smile faltered slightly. You see, I continued, when Robert died, he left me more than just the house, much more. I nodded to Tom, who opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. These are the deeds to all of Robert's properties, I said, spreading them across the table. The bed and breakfast on Harbour Street, the commercial building that houses this cafe, and the waterfront development lot on Pine Point. Marcus stared at the papers, his face going pale. Mom, I don't understand. I never mentioned them because Robert made me promise to keep them secret unless someone tried to take advantage of me. I looked directly at Vivian. He was very specific about that. He said if anyone ever tried to manipulate me into giving up my security, I should show them exactly what they were trying to steal. Vivian had gone very still, her eyes fixed on the property deeds. The total value of the portfolio is just over $4 million, I continued. All of it is in my name. All of it generates income, and all of it was supposed to be your inheritance. Marcus, yours and Sarah's, was supposed to be, Marcus whispered. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. Before I answer that, I think you should hear something. I pressed play, and their own voices filled the room, Vivian talking about liquidating assets and maximizing returns. Marcus dismissing Sarah as too emotional, their casual discussion of my incapacitation and their plans to restructure family dynamics. With each word, Marcus's face crumpled a little more. Vivian, on the other hand, went on the attack. You recorded us. That's illegal. You can't use that. Actually, I can. Tom interrupted calmly. Maine is a one-party consent state. Eleanor was present for every conversation, which makes the recordings perfectly admissible. I stopped the playback and looked at my son. Marcus, do you remember what you said about Vivian's buyer? The one who specializes in historic preservation, Marcus nodded mutely. Tom did some research on Millbrook Development LLC. Would you like to tell them what you found? Tom cleared his throat. Millbrook Development LLC was incorporated 6 months ago. It has exactly 2 officers, Marcus Whitmore and Vivian Hartley Whitmore. The silence that followed was deafening. You were planning to buy my house from me, I said, my voice deadly calm, with my own money, held in trust that you controlled. Then you were going to tear it down, build condominiums, and make millions in profit from the home where I raised my children. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, I can explain. Can you explain why you were willing to put me in a nursing home so you could steal my property? Can you explain why you were planning to cut Sarah out of her inheritance? Can you explain why you recorded me signing these papers without telling me what I was really agreeing to? I stood up and gathered the property deeds. I want you both to leave. Now, Eleanor, you're making a mistake, Vivian said, her mask finally slipping completely. You're an old woman living alone in a house you can't afford to maintain. You need us whether you want to admit it or not. What I need, I said, is family members who love me more than they love my money. What I need is a son who would protect me instead of preying on me. What I need is to know that my own child wouldn't sell me to the highest bidder for a piece of property. I walked to the door and held it open. Get out, both of you, and don't come back. Vivian grabbed her papers and stormed out, but Marcus lingered. Double quotes, Mom, please, I know how this looks, but I love you. I was trying to do what was best. Marcus, I said quietly, if you loved me, you would never have let someone convince you to treat me like a commodity to be managed and controlled. If you loved me, you would have asked what I wanted instead of deciding what was best for me. If you loved me, you would have trusted me to make my own decisions about my own life. He stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I know you are, I said, but sorry doesn't undo the betrayal. Sorry doesn't give me back the trust I had in my own son after he left. Tom and I sat in the empty dining room, watching the boats come and go in the harbor. Eleanor, what happens now? He asked. I pulled out another document from my purse, my real will, the one I'd had my lawyer prepare the day after Marcus's first visit. Now, I said, I make sure this never happens again. 3 weeks later, Sarah found me in the garden, planting bulbs for next spring's flowers. The November air was crisp but not yet bitter, and the late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. "Mom, Marcus is here," she said quietly. "He's been sitting in his car at the end of the driveway for 20 minutes. I think he's trying to work up the courage to come to the door." I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and looked toward the road. Sure enough, Marcus's blue sedan was parked under the old oak tree where he used to climb as a boy. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "That's not my decision to make," Sarah said. "But Mom, he looks broken. I've never seen him like this." I walked to the front porch and waved toward the car. After a moment, Marcus got out and walked slowly up the path. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks, thinner, grayer, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Mom," he said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps, "could we talk, please?" I gestured to the wicker chairs where Robert and I used to sit in the evenings. Watching the sun set over the harbour, Marcus sat down carefully, as if he wasn't sure he deserved even that small comfort. "I left her," he said without preamble. "I filed for divorce yesterday." I didn't say anything, just waited for him to continue. "It took me 3 weeks to really understand what happened," he said. 3 weeks to realize that she'd been manipulating me for months. Maybe years, making me doubt my own judgment, making me see you as a burden instead of my mother. He looked out at the harbour, his voice barely above a whisper. "She had me convinced that you were becoming incompetent, that you needed to be managed like a child. She'd point out every time you forgot a name or misplaced your keys. Every time you seemed tired or confused, she made me believe that keeping you in this house was cruel, that real love meant making hard decisions for your own good. And you believed her." "I wanted to believe her," Marcus said, and his honesty was like a knife to my heart, because believing her meant I didn't have to feel guilty about wanting the money, about wanting this house, about wanting to finally have the kind of financial security that would let me stop worrying about the future. He turned to look at me, and I saw the little boy who used to come running to me with scraped knees and broken toys. "Mom, I've spent my whole life feeling like I was never quite successful enough, never quite secure enough, and when Vivian showed me the numbers, what this house was worth, what the other properties could bring in, I saw a chance to finally stop being afraid." "So you decided to make me afraid instead." Marcus flinched as if I'd slapped him. "I didn't think of it that way. I told myself I was protecting you, providing for you. I convinced myself that what I wanted and what you needed were the same thing." We sat in silence for several minutes, watching the boats in the harbour bob gently at their moorings. "Marcus," I said finally, "do you know why your father put all the properties in my name?" He shook his head. "Because he grew up poor. His father lost everything in bad investments, and his mother spent her final years dependent on the charity of relatives who resented every penny they spent on her care." I touched the wedding ring I still wore on my left hand. "Robert swore that would never happen to me. He wanted to make sure I always had choices, always had independence, always had the power to say no to anyone who tried to control me, even your own children." "Especially your own children," I said, "because he knew that the people who can hurt us most are the ones we love most." Marcus was crying now, silent tears that tracked down his cheeks like silver rivers. Double quotes. "Mom, is there any way, can you ever forgive me?" I looked at this man who was my son, who had broken my heart and my trust, who had been willing to sacrifice my dignity for his own security. And I saw him clearly for the first time in years, not as the successful businessman he pretended to be, not as Vivian's manipulated husband, but as a frightened, middle-aged man who had lost his way. Marcus, I said, forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something you choose to accept. The question is, what are you going to do with it? I reached over and took his hand. Your father and I didn't build this life so our children could fight over the pieces. We built it so our family could have security, dignity, and choices, all of us, together, but the will you showed me was fake, I said. The real will divides everything equally between you and Sarah, just like it always has, Marcus. Stared at me after everything I did, after everything I was willing to do. You're still leaving me an inheritance. I'm leaving you a responsibility, I corrected, to take care of this family's legacy. To make sure Sarah's children have the same security we've tried to give you. To remember that wealth without wisdom is just greed with better packaging. Sarah appeared on the porch with a tray of coffee and Robert's famous apple turnovers. I thought you two might be getting hungry, she said, setting the tray on the table between us. And Marcus, the twins want to know if you're going to help them build that treehouse you promised last summer. Marcus looked up at his sister, and I saw something pass between them, forgiveness. Maybe, or at least the possibility of it, I'd like that, he said. I'd like that very much, as the sun set over Millbrook Harbour, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I sat on my porch with my children and felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, peace. Not because the crisis was over, but because my family was learning, slowly, painfully, but learning nonetheless, the difference between loving someone and owning them. Robert had been right to protect my independence, but he'd been wrong. About one thing, I didn't need the properties or the money to have power over my own life. The real power had always been in my ability to choose whom to trust, whom to forgive, and whom to love despite their failures. 3 months later, Marcus moved back to Millbrook Harbour, renting a small apartment downtown while he rebuilt his life and his relationship with his family. Vivian, I heard through the local gossip network, had moved back to Boston and was already engaged to a real estate developer twice her age. Sarah brought the twins over every Sunday for dinner, and Marcus joined us more often than not. We didn't talk about the money or the properties. Instead, we talked about Emma's college applications and Jake's basketball season. We talked about the book I was writing about Robert's fishing adventures and the garden renovation Sarah was planning for spring. We talked about family, not as a business arrangement or a financial institution, but as a group of imperfect people who had chosen to love each other despite their flaws. As I finished telling you this story, sitting in the garden where Robert and I planted our dreams and raised our children, I want you to know that families can survive betrayal, trust can be rebuilt, love can overcome greed, but only if we're willing to do the hard work of forgiveness and change. If you've faced a similar situation with family members who tried to take advantage of your age, your trust, or your love, please share your story in the comments below. So many of us have walked this painful path, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own strength. Remember, being older doesn't make you powerless, being loving doesn't make you naive, and being family doesn't give anyone the right to treat you as anything less than the strong, capable, valuable person you've always been. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell if this story resonated with you. Until next time, remember that wisdom isn't just about knowing what's right. It's about having the courage to act on that knowledge, no matter who tries to convince you otherwise.